Story number 1. Winter's Grasp. I still remember the first time I heard about Frosthaven. Nestled deep within the rugged mountains of Northern America, it was a place so remote that maps scarcely mentioned its existence. The town was perpetually cloaked in snow, the icy grip of winter never loosening its hold. For those few who knew of it, Frosthaven was a place of mystery and whispers, a town forgotten by time and shunned by the outside world. The legend of Winter Wraith was the stuff of local folklore, passed down through generations. According to the tales, Winter Wraith was an ancient spirit, a restless soul wronged by the very people who once called Frosthaven home. In the late 1700s, a group of villagers were accused of witchcraft, accused of consorting with dark forces beyond their understanding. They were captured, bound together, and burned at the heart of the town. Before their execution, they performed a desperate ritual, attempting to bind their souls to protect themselves from the wrath of those who condemned them. The ritual was only partially successful, trapping Winter Wraith in a state of eternal unrest. Each winter, the spirit awoke, seeking vengeance on those who dared to invade its sacred ground. 5 of us, Alex, Emma, Jake, Lily, and me, decided to seek out Frosthaven for a thrill, a break from our monotonous city lives. We were drawn by the allure of the unknown, eager to uncover the secrets hidden within the cursed forest known as the Cursed Woods. Renting an old cabin deep in the heart of the forest, we set out with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The journey to the cabin was arduous. The road was barely visible under layers of snow, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels around us. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we spotted an elderly man sitting by the roadside. He was bundled in a thick coat, his face weathered by countless winters. "Be careful," he rasped, his eyes hollow and warning. "This forest isn't a place for the faint of heart. Stay inside, and don't wander after dark." We exchanged glances, dismissing his warning as the ramblings of a lonely old man. "Thanks for the concern," Alex replied with a chuckle. "But we're here for an adventure." With that, he disappeared into the growing darkness, leaving us with a lingering sense of unease. As night fell, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it eerie sounds that seemed almost like whispers. The cabin stood before us, a dilapidated structure covered in a thick blanket of snow. Its windows were shattered, and the wooden planks bore the scars of countless winters. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The remnants of past lives lay scattered around, broken furniture, faded photographs, and strange symbols etched into the walls. Emma, always the most inquisitive, began exploring, her flashlight casting long shadows that danced across the room. She soon discovered an old journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. The journal belonged to Margaret, the last known resident of the cabin. Her writings detailed the harsh winters, the struggles to survive, and most intriguingly, the rituals meant to keep Winter Wraith at bay. She spoke of the symbols on the walls, ancient carvings that held the key to binding the spirit. As we delved deeper into her words, a sense of dread began to settle over us. In a moment of careless curiosity, I wiped away some of the grime on the wall, inadvertently erasing part of the binding symbols. A chill swept through the cabin, and the temperature plummeted. The windows, though sealed, seemed to let in an unnatural cold that seeped into our bones. Jake stared into a cracked mirror, his reflection wavering before morphing into the ghostly visage of a woman with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted in silent scream. When he turned back, the mirror was just a shattered pane reflecting the bleak room. That night, our nightmares were plagued by the same horrifying vision, a faceless woman with eyes as white as snow, her screams echoing through our subconscious. When we awoke, we found icy footprints leading from the entrance of the cabin to our beds, as if someone, or something, had been walking among us in our sleep. Days passed, but the grip of Winter Wraith only tightened. The snow outside grew heavier, isolating us further. Our phones lost signal, cutting us off from any hope of reaching the outside world. One evening, amidst a fierce blizzard, Mike vanished without a trace. He had followed a faint, sorrowful call into the forest, leaving us to wonder if the Winter Wraith had claimed him. Desperation set in as we tried to make sense of the journal's warnings. The symbols on the walls were part of a binding ritual, a fragile barrier that kept the spirit contained. By disrupting them, we had unleashed the vengeful spirit, and now it sought to reclaim its territory by any means necessary. One by one, we fell victim to the spirit's wrath. Alex was the first to disappear, swallowed by a sudden freeze that left no mark of his passage. Emma was dragged into the darkness, her screams fading into nothingness. Jake met a gruesome end, frozen solid in a matter of seconds, his lifeless body a testament to the spirit's cruelty. Lily was the last to fall, her reflection pulled into the shattered mirror, leaving her trapped in a spectral prison. I was the only one left, trembling in the cold embrace of the cabin. The spirit loomed before me, its presence a suffocating force. The journal had mentioned a way to rebind Winter Wraith, but it required a sacrifice. Someone had to confront the spirit directly, using the remaining symbols to seal it away once more. There was no other choice. I had to save myself and perhaps lay my friends' souls to rest. Summoning every ounce of courage, I began the ritual. The wind outside raged like a living thing, snowflakes swirling in a chaotic dance. The spirit's wails filled the cabin, a sound that pierced my very soul. I recited the incantations from the journal, the words resonating with power I barely understood. The symbols on the walls glowed with an ethereal light, and the air crackled with energy. Winter Wraith descended upon me, her presence overwhelming. The battle was both physical and spiritual, a struggle of wills against an ancient malevolence. I could feel her cold, dark essence trying to consume me, to drag me into eternal winter. But I pressed on, focusing on the words and the symbols, channeling every bit of strength I had left. With a final, desperate chant, the symbols blazed with a brilliant light, enveloping the spirit in a vortex of energy. Winter Wraith let out a final, anguished scream as she was pulled back into the confines of the binding, the cold seeping out of the cabin as the snow began to melt. The storm outside abated, leaving a serene stillness in its wake. I stood alone in the silent cabin, the weight of what I had done pressing down on me. The ritual had worked, the spirit was contained once more. But the cost was immense. My friends were gone, and their absence left a void that could never be filled. I knew I would carry the scars of that night for the rest of my life, haunted by the memories of Frosthaven and the souls I had lost. Leaving the cabin was a blur. The forest, once menacing and alive, now seemed calm and almost inviting. As I trudged through the snow, the town of Frosthaven loomed in the distance, its presence both a relief and a reminder of the horror we had faced. I never spoke of what happened, but the nightmares continued, a relentless reminder of Winter Wraith's brief release. Years passed, but the legend of Frosthaven never faded. Locals still spoke of the cursed forest and the spirits that roamed its depths. They knew the cycle was not truly broken, only postponed. Winter Wraith would awaken again, each time seeking vengeance on those who dared to disturb her peace. One chilly evening, long after my ordeal, I found myself driving past the remnants of Frosthaven. A sense of déjà vu washed over me, a haunting familiarity that I couldn't quite place. The snow had started to fall again, soft and silent, blanketing the landscape in white. As I navigated the narrow roads, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Without warning, my car skidded on the icy road, spinning out of control before coming to a halt against a tree. Dazed and disoriented, I stepped out into the storm, the cold biting at my skin. Through the swirling snow, I saw the outline of the old cabin, just as I had seen it years ago. A chill ran down my spine as I approached, the memories flooding back. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the air thick with the same eerie stillness. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, a sign that Winter Wraith's grip was weakening once more. As I stood there, I realized with a sinking heart that the cycle was beginning anew. The cabin, the forest, the town, everything was poised to repeat the horror I had desperately tried to escape. In that moment, I understood the true nature of Frosthaven. It wasn't just a place of forgotten snow and silent trees, but a living entity, feeding off the fear and souls of those who dared to uncover its secrets. And now, as the snow began to fall once more, I felt the presence of Winter Wraith closing in, ready to claim another victim in her unending quest for vengeance. The cabin door slammed shut, and the storm intensified, trapping me within the same nightmare that had taken so much from me. I realized that my story was not just an isolated tragedy but part of an eternal loop, a warning to those who sought the thrill of the unknown. As the snow swirled around me, I could hear the faint, familiar wails of Winter Wraith, knowing that Frosthaven would continue to claim its due, year after year, until the spirit's rage was finally appeased, or until the cycle could no longer be sustained. And so, the legend of Frosthaven endures, a chilling testament to the power of ancient spirits and the folly of those who dare to awaken them. As the snow continues to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white, the whispers of winter wraith echo through the forest, ensuring that Frosthaven remains a place of fear and mystery, forever bound by the icy grip of eternal winter. Story number 2. The Haunted Snowslide House. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in a bustling city, surrounded by the noise and lights, the idea of restless spirits wandering abandoned places seemed absurd. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened at Silver Peak Ski Resort. Silver Peak was once the crown jewel of winter vacations in the 1980s. Nestled high in the Rockies, it attracted skiers and snowboarders from all over the country with its pristine slopes and luxurious amenities. That all changed one fateful winter when a brutal snowstorm struck. The storm was relentless, battering the resort for days. On the third day, disaster struck. A cable car broke free from its tracks, plummeting down the mountain. Dozens perished in the icy descent, and Silver Peak was forever marked by tragedy. Since then, the resort had been abandoned, left to succumb to the relentless forces of nature and the whispers of the past. 6 of us, myself, my sister Sarah, her husband Mark, our friends Jenna, Mike, and Lisa, decided to visit the area for a winter getaway. We had heard the stories, but they seemed like nothing more than ghost tales told to spook tourists. When our car broke down just miles from Silver Peak due to an unexpected snowstorm, we were left with no choice but to seek shelter in the nearest building, the abandoned resort. As we trudged through knee-deep snow, the once grand structure loomed before us, its windows shattered and walls covered in a thick layer of ice. The entrance was framed by broken pillars and an overgrown pathway. Despite the foreboding sight, we were desperate for warmth and decided to press on. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the cold was unnaturally biting, as if the very essence of winter had seeped into the walls. The main hall was eerily intact, with grand chandeliers hanging precariously and furniture covered in white sheets. As we moved further in, Sarah noticed something odd, footprints leading into the building but no signs of anyone leaving. It was as if time had stood still the moment disaster struck. Jenna, always the curious one, stumbled upon an old logbook tucked away in a corner of the lobby. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic handwriting. It belonged to Thomas, an employee who had worked at Silver Peak during its heyday. His entries detailed strange occurrences leading up to the accident, unexplained footsteps at night, shadows darting across the ski slopes, and accidents that couldn't be explained by natural causes. As night fell, the resort seemed to come alive with unsettling phenomena. The lights in the main hall began to flicker, despite the absence of any power source. We laughed it off at first, attributing it to faulty wiring, but the chill in the air grew more oppressive. Mike glanced into an old mirror and saw the reflection of people who weren't there, families laughing, couples enjoying their time, all frozen in a moment long past. He rubbed his eyes, and when he looked back, the mirror was just a cracked pane reflecting our weary faces. Lisa suggested we explore the dining hall, and as we approached, the door swung open on its own. Inside, a grand table was set for a feast, but everything was covered in dust and untouched by time. Plates still held remnants of long-forgotten meals, and silverware glistened in the dim light as if waiting for guests who would never return. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, but we continued our exploration, trying to make sense of the eerie stillness. As we navigated through the sprawling resort, bloodstains began to appear on the floors, leading towards the old cable car area at the back. Sarah, following the trail, suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We all listened as the sound of children laughing echoed down the corridor. When Sarah turned to show us, all she saw were tiny footprints in the snow outside, leading nowhere. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling like the cries of the lost souls trapped within the walls of Silver Peak. Snow piled against every door and window, sealing us inside. Panic began to set in when Mark attempted to open a door to find an escape route, only to disappear into thin air. His screams echoed through the halls, but when we rushed to his last known location, there was no sign of him, only the lingering fears that something malevolent was at play. Nightmares plagued us as darkness took hold. We dreamed of the accident replaying endlessly, cables snapping, screams, and bodies falling into the unforgiving snow. When we awoke, icy footprints traced our paths from the entrance to our beds, as if the spirits were hunting us in our sleep. Determined to survive, we delved deeper into Thomas's logbook. It spoke of a dark ritual performed by the resort manager, Harold, in an attempt to protect the guests from the harsh winters. But something went terribly wrong, binding the souls of the victims to the resort forever. The ritual created a cycle, trapping everyone who entered the resort in an eternal loop of the tragic day. As the spirits grew restless, they began to reenact the horrors of that day. We heard Harold's voice, pleading for us to stay and compensate for the lost lives. Ghostly apparitions chased us through the halls, their hollow eyes and desperate cries driving us to the brink of madness. Jenna and Mike tried to rationalize what was happening, insisting that we find a way to break the curse, but their skepticism only fueled the spirit's wrath. In a desperate attempt to end the nightmare, we decided to confront Harold's spirit in the control room where the ritual had been performed. The room was dominated by a large, ornate symbol etched into the floor, the centerpiece of the binding ritual. As we approached, the temperature plummeted, and the room was filled with the anguished wails of the trapped souls. Realizing that breaking the symbol was the key to freeing ourselves, Lisa and I worked together to decipher the ancient markings. But the spirits were relentless, pushing us back with each step. In the chaos, Jenna was caught by a ghostly hand and dragged into the frozen banquet hall, her screams silenced by the icy grip of the past. With only Lisa and me left, we knew what had to be done. I grabbed a heavy object and smashed the symbol, while Lisa recited the incantations from Thomas's logbook. The room trembled as the barrier began to break, and the spirits were pulled back into the depths of the resort. The oppressive cold lifted, and the storm outside began to subside. But the victory came at a great cost. Lisa was nowhere to be found, and I was left alone amidst the remnants of Silver Peak's tragic history. As I stumbled out of the resort, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I looked back to see the building buried under a fresh blanket of snow, as if it had never been disturbed. Years have passed since that night, but the memories of Silver Peak haunt me still. I often wonder if the curse truly ended or if it simply lies dormant, waiting for the next unsuspecting group to stumble upon its icy grip. Sometimes, when a storm rolls in, I can almost hear the distant echoes of Harold's plea, reminding me that some places are best left forgotten. One winter, driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure, I returned to the Rockies. The snow was falling heavily, and the landscape was a mirror image of that fateful night. Navigating the familiar path, I found the remnants of Silver Peak, half buried in snow. The resort stood silent, its windows like dark, watching eyes. As I approached, a chill ran down my spine. The door creaked open slowly, inviting me inside. Steeling myself, I stepped into the main hall, where the grand chandelier swayed gently despite the absence of any breeze. The air was thick with the same oppressive cold, and the echoes of the past seemed to whisper my name. I realized then that the cycle was far from over. The resort was alive, feeding on the fear and souls of those who dared to enter. The legends were true, and Silver Peak would continue to claim its due, year after year, until the spirits were finally appeased, or until the cycle could no longer sustain itself. As I stood there, the symbols on the floor began to glow faintly, and the spirits of the past emerged once more, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The snowstorm raged outside, sealing my fate within the haunted walls of Silver Peak. The story of Silver Peak is a chilling reminder that some tragedies leave scars that never heal, and some places hold onto their secrets with a grip as cold and unforgiving as the eternal winter that defines them. Story number 3. Whispers of Groundhog Valley. I never planned to spend my winter reporting on a small-town festival, but when the assignment came, I couldn't resist. As a young journalist from Boston, I thrived on stories that were off the beaten path, tales that whispered secrets through the pages of forgotten newspapers. Groundhog Valley, a secluded town in the Northeast, with its annual Groundhog Day celebration, promised just that. But I soon discovered that some secrets are better left buried beneath layers of snow and silence. Groundhog Valley was the kind of place that didn't show up on most maps. Nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, it was a hidden gem or a forgotten relic, depending on who you asked. Every February, the town came alive with the Groundhog Festival, centering around Whispering Pete, a marmot revered as a sacred symbol. According to local lore, Pete's predictions were more than mere weather forecasts. They were intertwined with the town's very existence. I arrived in Groundhog Valley on a frigid January morning, the sky overcast and threatening snow. My car struggled through the thick drifts, the heater fighting a losing battle against the biting cold. The town was a cluster of wooden buildings, their exteriors weathered by decades of harsh winters. Despite its isolation, there was an air of quiet anticipation hanging over the place. At the heart of the town stood the festival grounds, adorned with colorful bunting and twinkling lights that promised warmth and festivity against the bleak winter backdrop. The centerpiece was a large, ornate cage where Whispering Pete resided. The locals treated the marmot with reverence, considering him a spiritual guardian rather than a mere animal. My assignment was to cover the festival, but I was warned about the town's dark undercurrents. Before my arrival, I had heard hushed whispers about disappearances and mysterious deaths following the festival. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I decided to dig deeper. On my first evening, just days before the festival, I received an anonymous note slipped under my door. Pete doesn't just see the weather, he sees death. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smeared as if written in haste or fear. I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was watching me, their eyes hidden behind the shadows of the town. Despite the warning, my curiosity only intensified. The festival began under a blanket of night, the moon casting an eerie glow over the snow-covered ground. Lanterns flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters around the festival area. The townsfolk, dressed in their finest winter attire, moved with a mix of excitement and solemnity. Children played near the fire pits, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. As midnight approached, the grand ceremony was about to commence. The crowd hushed, their eyes fixed on Whispering Pete's cage. I watched as the marmot was gently lifted out, its eyes glinting with an unsettling intelligence. The townspeople began their chanting, a rhythmic incantation that seemed to resonate with the very ground beneath us. Pete sat atop a pedestal, gazing out over the crowd with an almost human-like awareness. His presence was both captivating and disconcerting, the way his eyes seemed to pierce through the souls of those who met his gaze. I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine as the chants grew louder, more fervent. Suddenly, Pete's behavior changed. He began to emit a series of high-pitched squeaks, each one echoing ominously through the night. The crowd responded with a fervent energy, interpreting each sound as a sign. Then, in a swift motion, Pete turned his head toward me, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the world reduced to the two of us in that frozen moment. I felt an inexplicable connection, as if Pete could see into the depths of my soul, uncovering secrets I didn't even know I held. A sense of dread settled over me, the anonymous note's warning now all too real. I glanced around, noticing subtle signs of unease among the townsfolk, their smiles wavering just slightly, eyes darting toward me with silent warnings. The next morning, the festival had ended, but Groundhog Valley remained shrouded in a thick fog of unease. As I began interviewing the locals, the shadows of their smiles lingered like ghosts. Some were eager to share stories of Pete's accurate predictions, while others remained tight-lipped, their eyes avoiding mine. One elderly woman, Mrs. Thatcher, finally spoke up. Her voice was brittle, her hands trembling as she recounted the festival's history. "It's been our tradition for generations," she said, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "But with every prediction Pete makes, there's a price we pay. Not everyone comes back the same, or at all." I pressed her for more details, sensing a deeper layer of fear beneath her words. She hesitated before continuing. "There are old tales of those who tried to defy the ritual, to break free from Pete's watchful eyes. They paid the ultimate price." Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the town's archives, poring over old records and faded photographs. I discovered that Groundhog Valley had a dark history intertwined with the festival. Decades ago, during the height of the Cold War, the town had served as a covert research site. The scientists there believed that Whispering Pete possessed an inexplicable ability to predict catastrophic events, beyond mere weather forecasting. Rumors of unethical experiments and unexplained phenomena swirled around the town, but no concrete evidence was ever found. The research facility was quietly dismantled, and the town returned to its quiet existence, the festival remaining as a reminder of the past. As the festival approached its peak, strange occurrences began to unfold. I started experiencing vivid dreams of Whispering Pete, his presence haunting my nights with cryptic messages and foreboding images of death and destruction. Each dream left me more unsettled, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. One evening, as I sat alone in my rented cabin, I received another anonymous note. Pete sees all. Trust no one. My heart pounded as I realized that someone in the town was aware of my investigation, possibly trying to warn me or silence me. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to confront the town's mayor, a stern man named Walter Collins. His demeanor was guarded, his eyes cold and calculating. The festival is sacred, he insisted when I questioned him about the disappearances. It's a tradition that binds our community. Interfering with it brings nothing but chaos. I could see the fear behind his authoritative facade, a silent plea for me to abandon my quest. But I was resolute. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. One night, as the town prepared for the final phase of the festival, I returned to the festival grounds, armed with my notes and recordings. The air was thick with anticipation, the townsfolk moving with a mix of reverence and anxiety. Whispering Pete was back in his cage, the final act of the ritual about to unfold. As the ceremony began, I watched as Pete's cage was lifted once more. The chanting grew louder, more intense, as if calling upon forces beyond our understanding. I moved closer, trying to capture every detail, every nuance of the ritual. Suddenly, Pete's eyes met mine once again. This time, the connection was more profound, the sense of dread overwhelming. I felt an invisible force pulling me toward him, my body moving against my will. The crowd's chanting reached a fever pitch, the symbols they held aloft glowing with an unearthly light. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the festival. It wasn't just about predicting the weather, it was a sacrificial ritual, an ancient covenant between the townsfolk and Whispering Pete. Each year, Pete chose a few to be sacrificed, maintaining a balance that kept the town safe from greater evils. Panic surged through me as I realized I was next. I tried to break free, but the invisible chains of the ritual held me tight. The townsfolk's faces blurred into masks of serenity and menace, their chants a haunting lullaby that echoed in my mind. Desperate, I remembered the anonymous notes. There had to be a way to break the curse, to free both Pete and the town from this cycle of death. As the ceremony reached its climax, I mustered all my courage and interrupted the ritual. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and defiance. The crowd froze, their eyes turning toward me with a mix of surprise and anger. Mayor Collins stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand," he whispered. "This is our only protection." I shook my head, determined to expose the truth. It's not right to sacrifice innocent lives. There has to be another way. A cold wind swept through the grounds, the symbols on the banners flaring with a dark energy. Pete's eyes glowed ominously, and a spectral presence seemed to descend upon the festival. The ground trembled, and the air grew thick with a malevolent force. Suddenly, shadows coalesced into ghostly figures, the spirits of past sacrifices rising to confront me. Their hollow eyes bore into mine, their silent screams echoing in the frozen air. I backed away, my mind racing to find a solution. In a flash of insight, I remembered the research facility's records, rumors of an ancient artifact, hidden within the town, that could sever the bond between Pete and the townsfolk. If I could find it, perhaps I could end the cycle of sacrifice. As chaos erupted around me, I sprinted toward the old library, the only building that remained untouched by the passage of time. Inside, I searched through dusty tomes and forgotten manuscripts, my fingers trembling as I traced the outlines of ancient symbols. Finally, I found it, a reference to the Heartstone, an artifact believed to be the source of Pete's power. With newfound determination, I followed the clues, navigating through hidden passages and secret chambers beneath the library. The path was treacherous, the walls cold and slick with ice, but I pressed on, guided by the flickering light of my flashlight. In the depths of the underground chamber, I found it, a stone pulsating with a dark, otherworldly energy. The Heartstone lay atop an altar, surrounded by intricate carvings that spoke of ancient rituals and binding spells. I knew what I had to do. To break the curse, I had to destroy the Heartstone, but doing so would require immense courage and possibly my own life. As I reached out to grasp the stone, the spirits closed in, their ethereal hands reaching for me. Whispering Pete materialized before me, his presence both sorrowful and wrathful. "You cannot break what has been bound," he intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber. I hesitated, feeling the weight of countless sacrifices pressing down on me. But I couldn't let more lives be lost. Summoning every ounce of strength, I hurled the heartstone against the altar, shattering it into a million pieces. A blinding light enveloped the chamber, and a deafening silence followed. When the light faded, the spirits were gone, their eternal torment finally at peace. Pete's form began to dissolve, his eyes softening with a bittersweet farewell. "Thank you," he whispered before vanishing into the ether. I stumbled out of the chamber, gasping for breath as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The storm outside had abated, and the first rays of dawn pierced through the darkness. The townsfolk stood in stunned silence, their eyes no longer hollow but filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. Mayor Collins approached me, his expression one of profound gratitude and regret. "You've done what we couldn't," he said quietly. "Groundhog Valley can finally move on." As the town began to heal, the festival was forever changed. No longer a sacrificial ritual, it became a celebration of liberation and remembrance. The townsfolk embraced a new tradition, honoring the memory of those lost and the spirit that had once bound them. I left Groundhog Valley with a heavy heart and a story that would haunt me for years to come. The anonymous notes, the eerie connection with Pete, and the desperate struggle to break the curse had left an indelible mark on my soul. I often wondered if the peace I had helped to achieve was truly everlasting or if the shadows of the past would one day rise again. Years later, I returned to Groundhog Valley, driven by a mix of nostalgia and a lingering sense of duty. The town had flourished, its people vibrant and hopeful, the scars of the past fading like footprints in the snow. But as I walked through the festival grounds, now vibrant with life and laughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Under the bright lights of the current year's Groundhog Festival, I caught a glimpse of something familiar, a reflection in the glass of the marmot's cage. Whispering Pete's eyes met mine once more, a silent acknowledgement of the bond we had formed. My heart skipped a beat as a chill wind swept through the grounds, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a promise: peace is fragile. In that moment, I realized that while the curse had been broken, the legacy of Groundhog Valley was far from over. The spirits of the past lingered, their memories intertwined with the present, ensuring that the town would never truly forget the price of survival. As I left the festival, the echoes of Whispering Pete's gaze stayed with me, a reminder that some bonds transcend life and death, forever entwined in the whispers of Groundhog Valley. I often think back to that winter in Groundhog Valley, the cold biting at my bones and the weight of lives lost hanging over me like a shroud. Writing this story was a journey into the heart of darkness, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the lengths we go to protect those we love. But even as the years pass, the memories remain vivid, the whispers of Pete's legacy a constant reminder that some traditions carry secrets too dangerous to uncover. Groundhog Valley continues to thrive, its annual festival a beacon of hope and renewal. Yet, on the coldest nights, when the wind howls through the trees and the snow blankets the town in silence, I can't help but wonder if the spirits are truly at rest or if they are merely waiting, biding their time until the next unwitting soul dares to challenge the whispers of the past. And so, the legend of Whispering Pete endures, a chilling reminder that some bonds are forged in darkness and that the echoes of the past can never be fully silenced. As long as Groundhog Valley stands, so too will the whispers of its haunted history, forever entwined with the lives of those who dare to listen. Story number 4. The Time Loop of Shadows. I never believed in curses or supernatural phenomena. My life in the bustling city had been a testament to logic and reason, dismissing anything that couldn't be explained by science or rational thought. But Groundhog Valley, my quaint little hometown in the Northeast, had a secret that would challenge everything I thought I knew about reality. Groundhog Valley was a small, secluded town where the Groundhog Day Festival was the highlight of the year. It was a tradition passed down through generations, centering around a marmot named Shadow, revered as the town's sacred symbol. Every February 2nd, the town would gather in the central square to watch Shadow emerge from his burrow and make his prediction: 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring. The townspeople treated the festival with an almost religious fervor, considering it a sacred ritual rather than just a charming local event. But there were whispers, hushed conversations in the local diner about strange disappearances and unexplained deaths following the festival. I'd heard these stories growing up but always dismissed them as mere folklore, the kind parents tell their kids to keep them in line. I didn't realize how true those stories would become until that fateful Groundhog Day. I was feeling particularly unmotivated that winter. My job at the office felt monotonous, and my life in Groundhog Valley had become a series of repetitive, uninspiring days. I was skeptical about the festival, viewing it as another mindless tradition. Maybe writing a piece on it could rekindle some excitement in my otherwise dull existence. The morning of Groundhog Day dawned cold and clear. I woke up to the familiar sound of my alarm clock, the same one that had jolted me awake for years. I got ready for the day, the heavy snow piling up outside my window serving as a reminder of the relentless winter. Today was the day Shadow would make his prediction, and I decided to attend the festival to gather material for my article. The town square was already bustling with activity by mid-morning. Booths lined the streets, filled with vendors selling everything from hot cocoa to handmade crafts. The air was filled with laughter and the aroma of roasted chestnuts. I found a spot near the stage where Shadow's cage would be placed, setting up my notebook and camera to capture the event. As I observed the crowd, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. The townspeople were overly enthusiastic, their faces lit with an almost manic excitement. Children played around, unaware of the deeper significance of the festival, while adults engaged in animated conversations about the weather and their plans for the year. Shadow was brought out amidst cheers and applause, the crowd parting to reveal the marmot perched atop a beautifully decorated pedestal. His dark eyes seemed to hold a depth of wisdom far beyond that of any ordinary animal. The anticipation in the air was palpable, the tension building as Shadow began to stir. The ceremony started with the mayor's speech, extolling the virtues of tradition and the importance of Shadow's role in guiding the town through the harsh winter. As he concluded, the drumroll began, and the crowd leaned in, eyes fixed on Shadow. For a moment, Shadow sat motionless, his gaze unwavering. Then, with a sudden movement, he burrowed into the ground and emerged moments later, standing upright on his hind legs. The crowd erupted in cheers as Shadow made his prediction, his presence commanding silence. 6 more weeks of winter, the consensus, was announced, and the townspeople celebrated with renewed vigor, seemingly oblivious to the shadows lurking beneath their festivities. I returned home that evening, my mind still buzzing with the day's events. As I sat down on my couch, a fierce snowstorm began to rage outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the temperature plummeted rapidly. The storm was unlike anything I had experienced before, the snow piling up so thickly that visibility outside was reduced to a mere few feet. I tried to distract myself by reading a book, but exhaustion overcame me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep on the couch. When I awoke, the room was dark, the storm outside having passed, leaving the world outside my window coated in a pristine layer of snow. I glanced at the clock. It was still the same time as the morning, the same day Groundhog Day. Puzzled, I got up and made my way to the window. The town square was eerily silent, the festival setup from earlier the day before still in place. It was as if the entire day had reset. My heart raced as I tried to piece together what was happening. Had I somehow slipped into a time loop? Determined to find answers, I ventured out into the now quiet town. The streets were empty, the only sound the crunch of my boots on the fresh snow. As I approached the town square, I saw the same booth setups, the same decorations, and, of course, Shadow's cage still stationed on the pedestal. I approached the stage, expecting to see the festival organizers, but the area was devoid of people. Confused and increasingly anxious, I took out my phone to check the time. The screen showed the same date and time as earlier, confirming my suspicion. I was trapped in a time loop, reliving the same Groundhog Day over and over. Initially, I thought it was a bizarre dream or some sort of hallucination. But the evidence was irrefutable. Determined to break free, I decided to change something, anything, to see if it would alter the course of events. I considered skipping the festival, leaving town early, or confronting Shadow directly, but each attempt ended the same way, waking up to the beginning of the day, back on my couch. As the days repeated, I noticed subtle changes. Shadows seemed longer, and the coldness in the air felt more oppressive. The townspeople, too, began to act differently, more subdued, almost hollow, as if they were aware of the loop but unable to break free. My initial attempts to interact differently with them only reinforced the sense of being watched, their eyes filled with a silent fear. Then came the first sign of true horror. On the second iteration of Groundhog Day, as I was about to leave the festival, I received an anonymous note slipped under my door. Shadow doesn't just predict the weather, he predicts death. The handwriting was jagged, the ink smeared with what looked like blood. My skepticism waned as the loop continued, and I started experiencing strange phenomena. In one loop, I saw a shadowy figure lurking at the edge of my vision, its presence a constant, haunting reminder that something was very wrong. In another, I heard whispers emanating from Shadow's cage, voices speaking in a language I couldn't comprehend. One night, as I lay awake trying to comprehend my predicament, I saw Shadow in my dream, but not as a mere marmot. He stood tall, a dark silhouette against a backdrop of swirling snow, his eyes empty and devoid of life. "You cannot escape," he whispered, his voice echoing through the chambers of my mind. "The cycle must continue." The next day, I delved into the town's library, searching for any clues about the festival's true nature. Dusty old books and faded newspapers told stories of past Groundhog Days, some marred by tragedy and unexplained phenomena. I discovered a recurring pattern of disappearances and deaths following each festival, always marked by an unnatural intensity of the storm. The library's archives held a journal from a local historian, detailing an ancient ritual that bound the town to Shadow. According to the entries, Groundhog Day was more than a festival, it was a sacrificial rite designed to appease a malevolent spirit. Shadow was not just a marmot but a vessel for this dark entity, ensuring the town's survival through perpetual sacrifice. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Groundhog Day was a cursed day, a time when the townsfolk unknowingly kept a dark power at bay through repeated sacrifices. My presence in the loop was no accident. I had been chosen as the next sacrifice to continue the cycle. Desperate to find a way out, I sought out the oldest resident of Groundhog Valley, Mrs. Thompson, who had lived through countless Groundhog Days. Her frail frame and wise eyes held the weight of untold stories. She confirmed my fears, explaining that the only way to break the cycle was to confront the spirit and end the ritual, but it required immense bravery and a deep understanding of the town's dark history. Armed with this knowledge, I embarked on a mission to disrupt the ritual. I began by retracing the steps of the ancient ceremony, piecing together the components that held the loop in place. I learned that Shadow's cage was more than a simple enclosure, it was the focal point of the binding ritual, containing the spirit's power. As the festival approached, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. The townspeople, still trapped in their routine, moved with a mix of reverence and anxiety, their smiles masking the fear that lurked beneath. I knew that this Groundhog Day would be the final one, the day when the ritual would either be broken or continue its deadly cycle. On the eve of the final loop, I decided to act. I approached Shadow's cage, now seeing it for what it truly was, a conduit for the malevolent force. The air around me crackled with dark energy, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The shadowy figure from my dreams materialized before me, its form shifting and contorting into something almost human. "You cannot stop what is destined," Shadow intoned, his voice a mix of sorrow and wrath. "The cycle ensures our survival." But I refused to accept it. I had to end the suffering, not just for myself, but for everyone in Groundhog Valley. Summoning every ounce of courage, I began to dismantle the ritual, breaking the bindings that held Shadow's spirit. The room trembled, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within. As the final piece of the ritual was undone, the dark entity struggled to maintain its hold. The shadowy figure reached out, its touch freezing me to the core, but I pressed on, determined to free the town from its curse. With a final, desperate effort, I shattered the ceremonial symbols, severing the link between Shadow and the spirit. A blinding light engulfed the room, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The storm outside subsided, replaced by a serene silence. I felt the loop dissolve, the weight of countless Groundhog Days lifting from my shoulders. Exhausted but triumphant, I looked around to see the townspeople awakening from their trance, unaware of the darkness that had been lifted. But as I left Groundhog Valley, the sun breaking through the clouds felt like a new beginning. Yet, a lingering unease stayed with me. What if the cycle wasn't entirely broken? What if the spirit found another way to return, seeking a new vessel to continue its reign of terror? Years have passed since that harrowing Groundhog Day. I've moved on, trying to forget the nightmares and the endless loops that nearly consumed me. But sometimes, in the dead of winter, I hear whispers carried on the wind, a faint echo of Shadow's voice, reminding me that some curses never truly end. And in the quiet moments, I can almost feel the cold gaze of Shadow, watching, waiting, ensuring that Groundhog Valley's dark legacy remains etched in the annals of my haunted memories. One winter, driven by a mix of curiosity and a lingering sense of duty, I returned to Groundhog Valley. The snow was falling heavily, and the landscape was a mirror image of that fateful day. Navigating the familiar path, I found the remnants of the town, half buried in snow. The festival grounds stood silent, the decorations faded but still present, as if frozen in time. As I approached the central square, a chill ran down my spine. The cage that once held Shadow was gone, replaced by an empty pedestal. The town felt different, as if the very essence of Groundhog Day had been altered. Determined to ensure the curse was truly broken, I began searching for any remnants of the ritual. In the town's library, I found what I was looking for, an old tome hidden behind rows of dusty books. It detailed the ancient ritual that had bound Shadow to the town, explaining how the sacrificial cycle was maintained through the repeated Groundhog Days. According to the text, destroying the ceremonial symbols was only a temporary solution, a way to weaken the spirit but not eliminate it entirely. Realizing that the curse could resurface at any time, I knew I had to take further action. The tome mentioned a specific location where the spirit's essence was anchored, deep within the forest, near Shadow's original burrow. Armed with this knowledge, I ventured into the woods, the path obscured by thick snow and darkness. As I walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, the silence oppressive. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. I could feel the presence of something watching me, a dark force lingering in the shadows. The journey was arduous, each step feeling heavier than the last, my mind plagued by doubt and fear. Finally, I reached the site, a clearing where Shadow had first emerged on that cursed Groundhog Day. In the center stood a stone altar, the remnants of the ritual etched into its surface. I approached cautiously, the forest around me seeming to hold its breath. Determined to end the cycle once and for all, I began to perform the counter-ritual described in the tome, chanting the ancient words with all the strength I could muster. The ground beneath me trembled, and the air crackled with energy as the spirit of Shadow manifested before me, its form dark and menacing. "You cannot undo what has been done," it hissed, the coldness in its voice seeping into my bones. "The cycle must continue." But I refused to back down. I continued the ritual, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. The forest seemed to come alive around me, the trees swaying as if in a dance of their own. The spirit struggled, its form flickering between shadows and light, but I pressed on, determined to free the town from its grasp. With a final, powerful chant, the symbols on the altar glowed with a blinding light, and the spirit let out a wail that echoed through the forest. The ground shook violently, and the energy surrounding me intensified, pulling me into the very heart of the ritual. I felt myself being torn apart, the darkness enveloping me, but my resolve held firm. As the light reached its zenith, the spirit was pulled back into the altar, its form dissipating into the ether. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the forest. Exhausted but victorious, I collapsed to the ground, the snow falling gently around me. I returned to Groundhog Valley, the town now free from its dark curse. The townspeople, unaware of the true extent of the danger, welcomed me with smiles and gratitude. The Groundhog Day festival continued, now a celebration of liberation and remembrance, honoring the memory of those who had been sacrificed and the spirit that had once bound them. But even as the town thrived, a lingering unease remained. I often wondered if the curse was truly broken or if the spirit was merely lying dormant, waiting for another chance to return. The whispers on the wind and the occasional shadow at the edge of my vision served as constant reminders that some bonds are forged in darkness and that the echoes of the past can never be fully silenced. Years later, I still hear the faint whispers of shadow when the winter winds howl through the trees. Groundhog Valley has moved on, but the legacy of that cursed day remains, a chilling reminder that some traditions carry secrets too dangerous to uncover. And as long as Groundhog Day is celebrated, the shadows of Groundhog Valley will forever linger, waiting for the next unwitting soul to challenge the whispers of the past. Story number 5. The Living Snowman. I never imagined that my quiet life in the small mountain town of Evergreen Ridge would become the setting of a nightmare. Growing up here, nestled among snow-covered peaks and dense forests, winter was both a blessing and a curse. It brought beauty and tranquility, but this particular winter felt different, colder, harsher, with an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite place. My name is Jamie, and I've always considered myself a realist. Working as an office clerk in the nearby city, I found comfort in routines and schedules. But Evergreen Ridge, my hometown, thrived on tradition, and none was more significant than our annual Groundhog Day festival. Every February, the town would gather in the main square to celebrate with a competition to build the largest and most creative snowman. This year, however, something felt off right from the start. Our group of 5 friends, Emma, Tommy, Lucy, Jake, and Billy, had been eagerly preparing for the festival. Emma, my older sister, was the leader of our group. She was smart, brave, and always knew how to keep us organized. Tommy, our resident science enthusiast, was fascinated by the mechanics of snowman construction. Lucy, shy and quiet, had an uncanny intuition about things that didn't add up. Jake, my reckless younger brother, was always up for a challenge, often leading us into trouble with his adventurous spirit. And then there was Billy, the youngest, whose innocence and naivety often made him the target of our playful teasing. This winter was different from any other we had experienced. The snow fell thick and heavy, covering the town in a relentless white blanket. The sky was perpetually overcast, and the air was sharper, colder than usual. Despite the harsh conditions, the townspeople were enthusiastic, their spirits high as they prepared for the festival. But beneath the surface, an unsettling tension lingered, something we couldn't quite grasp. It started on the first day of the festival. Emma and I were out in the main square, overseeing the final touches on our giant snowman. We had spent days meticulously crafting it, ensuring every detail was perfect. The crowd cheered as our snowman stood tall, a testament to our teamwork and creativity. But as night fell and the celebration wound down, a fierce snowstorm rolled in, more intense than any we had seen before. The wind howled through the streets, and the snow piled up quickly, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. We hurried back to Emma's house, seeking refuge from the storm. The warmth of the fire and the comforting routine of our nightly chats provided a sense of normalcy. But as the night wore on, the storm outside only seemed to grow stronger, its fury shaking the windows and doors. In the early hours of the morning, I awoke to the sound of the alarm clock blaring the same old tune I had heard every morning for years. Groggy and disoriented, I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the clock. It was still the same time as yesterday. Confused, I got up and walked over to the window, only to see the same snow-covered landscape staring back at me. The storm had passed, but everything outside remained untouched, as if time had stood still. I called out to Emma and the others, but there was no response. Hesitantly, I made my way to the living room, finding the group still asleep on the couch. As I sat down, a sense of dread washed over me. The calendar on the wall still marked the same day, and the memories of last night's storm felt distant yet eerily familiar. Determined to understand what was happening, I decided to investigate. Stepping outside, the snow crunched under my boots, the silence of the town amplifying my unease. I walked to the main square, expecting to see the aftermath of the storm, but everything was as it had been the night before. The snowman still stood proudly, untouched by the chaos that had ensued. As I pondered the strange loop, I noticed something peculiar about our snowman. It seemed alive. Its coal eyes glinted in the weak morning light, and its carrot nose pointed accusingly at me. A chill ran down my spine as I felt an inexplicable presence watching me from the shadows. Over the next few days, the loop continued. Each morning, I woke up to the same day, reliving the festival and the storm over and over. At first, it was disorienting, but soon it became a nightmare of repetition and terror. Each time, the snowstorm grew more violent, and the behavior of our snowmen became increasingly sinister. One morning, I noticed that our snowman had been knocked over by the storm, only for it to stand back up by itself the next day, its coal eyes staring blankly. It was as if the snowmen were becoming sentient, their movements subtle but unmistakable. When I told Emma and the others, they dismissed it as a trick of the light or our exhausted minds playing games with us. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The true horror began one night when the storm reached its peak. The wind howled with a fury that seemed almost alive, and the snow piled up so quickly that visibility was reduced to mere inches. As we huddled together for warmth, I heard a faint tapping on the window. Turning to look, I saw our snowman standing outside, its coal eyes gleaming with a malevolent intelligence. It began to move, slowly at first, then with alarming speed, reaching towards our house as if trying to break free from its icy prison. Panic set in as we realized that the snowmen were no longer just decorations, but something far more sinister. They moved with a purpose, their presence bringing an overwhelming sense of dread. One by one, the snowmen began to attack, banging on doors and windows, trying to gain entry. The sound was eerie, a combination of howling winds and the hollow laughter of the snowmen. Jake, ever the reckless one, tried to confront the snowmen, but he was quickly overwhelmed, dragged into the storm by invisible forces. His screams echoed through the night, but when the storm subsided, he was gone, leaving behind only the tracks leading into the forest. Our group was left in a state of shock, fear gnawing at our minds as we tried to comprehend the horror unfolding around us. Determined to find answers, Emma, Tommy, Lucy, and I began to investigate the origins of the snowmen. We discovered that our town had a dark history intertwined with ancient rituals and forgotten legends. In the old library, we found a dusty tome detailing a ritual performed by the indigenous people to protect the town from eternal winter. The ritual involved creating snowmen imbued with the spirits of the ancestors, binding them to protect the town from supernatural forces. However, something had gone wrong over the years. The ritual had been forgotten, but the binding remained, causing the snowmen to gain sentience and seek revenge for being bound to eternal winter. Each loop, the snowmen grew stronger, their connection to the spirit world deepening, turning them into vengeful entities hungry for freedom and retribution. As we delved deeper into the mystery, the snowmen's attacks became more coordinated and violent. They no longer just hung around the town square, but began to appear all over town, targeting anyone who dared to question the ritual or seek to break the cycle. The lines between reality and nightmare blurred as the snowmen became relentless predators, hunting us through the frozen landscape. One night, while searching the library for more clues, Lucy stumbled upon a hidden room behind a bookshelf. Inside, we found remnants of the ancient ritual, snowflake-shaped symbols etched into the walls, old ceremonial tools, and a large, central stone altar. It was clear that this was the heart of the ritual, the source of the snowmen's power. Tommy, with his scientific mind, hypothesized that the only way to break the loop and stop the snowmen was to disrupt the ritual. But the ritual was deeply ingrained in the town's history, and tampering with it could have dire consequences. Emma, ever the brave leader, insisted that we had to try, no matter the risk. As the loop continued, the snowmen grew bolder, their attacks more coordinated. They began to manipulate the weather, intensifying the snowstorms to trap us and make escape impossible. Our town was turning into a frozen wasteland, the once beautiful landscape now a death trap. Desperate, we returned to the hidden room, determined to perform the counter-ritual to sever the binding. But as we prepared to act, the snowmen launched a coordinated assault, attacking us from all sides. The room was filled with the sounds of shattering ice and the unearthly laughter of the snowmen, their forms twisting and shifting in the dim light. In the chaos, Billy, our youngest and most innocent member, got separated from the group. He was drawn to one of the snowmen, his naivety making him an easy target. As the snowman reached out to grab him, Lucy sprang into action, managing to pull Billy away at the last moment. But in the struggle, Lucy was overpowered, dragged into the storm with a final, blood-curdling scream. With only Emma, Tommy, and myself left, we knew that the counter-ritual was our only hope. We began the ceremony, chanting the ancient words that we had painstakingly deciphered from the tome. The snowmen circled us, their presence growing more oppressive, their whispers filling the room with fear and desperation. As we reached the climax of the ritual, the storm outside intensified, the wind howling like a living entity. The symbols on the walls began to glow with an ethereal light, and the central altar pulsed with dark energy. The snowmen surged forward, their coal eyes burning with rage, trying to disrupt our efforts. Emma, with unwavering determination, continued to chant, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. Tommy focused on disrupting the central source of the ritual, using his scientific knowledge to channel heat and light to weaken the snowmen. I took on the role of maintaining the chant, feeling the weight of our town's fate pressing down on me. As the ritual reached its peak, the snowmen began to lose their form, their bodies melting into the storm as their power waned. But the cost was immense. The ritual required a sacrifice, a person to anchor the counter-ritual and sever the binding once and for all. Without hesitation, Emma stepped forward, volunteering herself for the sacrifice. Her bravery was inspiring, and as she did, the symbols on the walls blazed with a brilliant light, and the snowmen dissipated into the storm, their presence fading away. The storm began to calm, the oppressive cold lifting as the ritual took hold. The loop was broken, and the cycle of horror came to an end. Exhausted but victorious, we stood amidst the remnants of the ritual, knowing that Emma had given everything to save our town. As dawn broke, the snowstorm finally ceased, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the heavy clouds. The town was silent, the nightmare over, but the scars remained. We mourned the loss of Emma, her sacrifice a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once gripped our town. In the aftermath, the town slowly returned to normal, the snowmen becoming nothing more than lifeless sculptures. But the memories of that winter lingered, the fear and trauma etched into our minds. We knew that the ritual had been broken, but the lingering sense of dread remained, a reminder that some curses leave lasting marks. 1 year later, as I walked through the now peaceful town, I couldn't help but notice a small branch sprouting from the snow near the stone altar. It was a simple sign, but it carried a message that the threat was not entirely gone. The darkness could return, waiting for another chance to rise from the snow. Groundhog Valley remained a place of beauty and tradition, but the memory of that winter, the living snowmen, the sacrifices, and the ultimate bravery of my friend, served as a testament to the thin line between innocence and horror. As long as the snow fell and the festival continued, the shadows of our past would always linger, ensuring that the story of the living snowmen would never be forgotten. Years have passed since that harrowing winter, but the memories remain vivid in my mind. I often think about Emma and the sacrifices we made to save our town. Groundhog Day still comes around each year, celebrated with the same enthusiasm, but now with a deeper understanding of its true significance. Sometimes, when the snow begins to fall, I can almost hear the faint whispers of the past, echoing through the silent streets of Evergreen Ridge. The innocence of childhood has been forever tainted by the horrors we faced, and the bonds we forged in the darkest of times remain unbreakable. Groundhog Valley has learned to move forward, honoring the memory of those lost and the resilience of those who survived. But the legacy of that winter lives on, a chilling reminder that some traditions carry secrets too dangerous to uncover and that the line between reality and nightmare is often thinner than we dare to believe. As I sit by the fire, watching the snowflakes dance in the glow of the evening light, I know that the story of Evergreen Ridge and the living snowmen will forever be a part of who I am. It serves as a reminder that even in the most peaceful places, darkness can lurk, waiting to claim its due. And so, the town remains a sanctuary of snow and silence, forever bound by the memories of a winter that defied reason and embraced the haunting whispers of the past.